I'm Janice Stevenson, and this is Bethel Today. This is the television show that is sponsored by the Bethel Democratic Town Committee. And tonight we're going to be speaking with our first selectman, Matt Knickerbocker, about what's going on with our budget currently. We've just come through the public hearing, and we're getting ready to go into town meeting, and we're going to talk to him about what's happening with the budget, how the budget is divided, and how the process has gone thus far, what our dates are coming up, etc. So, Mr. Knickerbocker, welcome to the show. It's nice to see you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Good. So let's start out with just a little bit about process. Maybe talk a little bit, because people may not know how this works. When did the budgeting process actually start this year?
When did it really start, or how does it feel? It felt like it started about 2 years ago.
Okay. When did it really start?
Well, it depends on which side you're talking about. With the school side, since I have 10 years experience as a former Board of Ed member, as you know, that process actually starts almost at the beginning of the school year. Mm-hmm. I would say by October, November, the process is beginning. I mean, the school personnel really have to get going almost a full year ahead of the
And that's
thing.
Actually starting with the actual schools themselves,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's both a top-down and a bottom-up. It starts with the bottom-up. It starts with a needs assessment by the principals and the personnel there, and then it goes up to central office, and central office says, nice try, you know, it goes back down, and through many months of work, they will arrive at a number. Now, it's really tough for the school people, because more than the town side, the school systems in Connecticut are reliant on a lot of state funding.
Right. What is that? There's actually a grant that we tend to get every year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
well,
what's
there's
that
several.
Called? What's the big one?
The big one is ECS, which stands for Educational Cost Sharing. Okay. And Bethel is, because of the demographics of our town, we actually get a pretty big chunk of money from that. So, and you know, just to bring up another topic, when the state is going through its gyrations with budget, and the state's not in great shape, there's always a danger that, you know, that every year as the state tries to close its budget gap, all the school systems and the town and first selectmen and mayors get nervous and say, well, is the state going to take ECS away? Because that accounts for close to $4,000 worth of $4 million out of our budget.
But when you talk about it taking it away, now it occurs to me that a few years ago that they were funding that pretty well, and now more recently there have been some shortfalls, haven't there?
Not in ECS. The other big area is, excuse me, I said $4 million. That's actually not that correct. It's a bigger chunk of that. It's almost like 30% of the overall budget. But to go back to your other question, the other one that is a big chunk of funding that comes from the state that does fluctuate a lot is special ed excess cost reimbursement. And that's a very complicated formula, but the state has been known to take away funding for school systems in the middle of the school year after we're budgeted, say, oh, we told you were going to get, you know, $10 million. We were kidding. You're going to get 7. And so, you know, in the middle of the year, or whatever that number is, but they've changed that, and that's always a big concern. And
that's actually something that I think got factored in this year to the Board of Ed budget. Is they were planning on actually seeing the state do that, correct?
Yes. Now, for this year, they're going from last year to the current year we're in. There was no change.
Right.
The school system has been advised that there will be a slight reduction next year. That's been factored into the budget, and we just hope that you know, it holds. It could change, but right now we're hoping that it holds.
So when does the town start doing their budgeting process?
Well, the town normally starts, I would say, about the same time. It's different this year because it was this past year because it was an election year. Right. So of course, when there's a change of administration, you know, things kind of get started a little bit later. You know, the new person, in this case being me, has to come in. You have to get used to things. You have to get the lay of the landscape, try to get a handle on the current budget, and then. So I don't really think I got started with the whole process until mid-January. Right. And next year, I can guarantee you it's going to be way earlier. Right. But
because you were sworn in actually the beginning of December.
Beginning of December, and I started going over the current year expenditures just to see where we were. But in terms of forward planning for the upcoming fiscal year, I couldn't get started till like the first or second week of January. And then it's been a real whirlwind since then, because we have to put the budget together, and the hearings with the Board of Finance start pretty much the 1st of February and go throughout the month, and then there's several more steps.
And each department within the town, and the Board of Ed counts as a single department, except for their maintenance, which is actually part of the town, the 460 account, right?
The 460 account, the school maintenance is jointly managed by both the Board of Ed and the town.
Okay.
But you're right. It's considered.
But each one is presented separately, and the Board of Ed is one of those, and there's a whole collection on the town side.
And you bring up something that it just occurred to. I've known this for years, but it just occurred to me as being I wouldn't say problematic, but it's curious. The Board of Ed budget is 2/3 of the town spending, and it's treated as one department. So you have this monster department, and then you have a series of little departments within the town structure, and every one of those little departments has to spend a couple hours going before the Board of Finance.
Right.
Which it's almost like the process is reversed. But we're going to work on streamlining that and making it more I would say clearer and more straightforward next year.
Okay. So just to make sure everybody knows, and I'm going to start by doing, because this is how it's divided actually for referendum. The percentage of increase as it stands right now that's going to go to town meeting for the Board of Ed is what percentage?
2.56.
And the town side, which is everything else?
Everything else.
Including building maintenance for the schools?
Including building maintenance for the schools and including debt service.
Including debt service, okay.
All those things together are 5.72.
Okay. Can you talk about what it is? Because obviously there's a fairly major number difference there.
Yes.
What is it that's driving the town side to make that number higher?
That's a good question, and that is really one of the most important things that I really want our viewers to understand, because it is unusual for the town side. For years we've had pressure on the education side for a lot of reasons. Changes in funding.
And they have always answered, or pretty often answered that pressure, I have to add.
Yes, that's true, they do. And this year the town side is, and I'm going to be very frank about this, I really did not want to start my first term coming in with, if you exclude debt service, that increase is well over 6%. And I'm looking at this saying, good Lord, how can we do this?
Right.
But there are some very important cost drivers that people really need to understand. The biggest one on the town side is employee benefits, and that includes pensions.
Oh, okay.
And the pensions is the biggest one,
now,
and that alone is.
And what's happening with the pensions? It's because that money was kept back from it, or something went on?
Well, the biggest problem with the pension line, and I'll get into a little bit about how they work, because I've discovered that some people don't really understand that, but the biggest problem with the pension line is that when the Wall Street industry crashed a year and a half ago, that brought down the value of the pension funds that we have.
And the pension fund is actually when people receive their pension checks, it's coming off of that fund.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now that's important to understand that difference, and I'll illustrate it with an example. I had two residents come to see me last week, and they're concerned about the budget. They wanted to see me. They wanted to ask some questions, so we sat down in my office and had a chat. And one of the gentlemen runs a small business, and he says, I have a pension plan for my employees, and I don't have to put anything like this amount of money. I mean, this is a big amount of money. And I said, well, tell me how this works. And he says, well, the employee puts some in, and I put some in.
And I said, employee match.
Yeah, and I said, and then what happens? And he says, well, when they retire, they retire. And I said, so they take that money and they leave, right? He says, yes. And I said, well, do you keep paying them after they leave? And he said, no, they take their money is invested. They take it with them. That's theirs now.
Well, that's a 401k.
I said, that's a retirement. That's not a pension. That's a retirement plan.
Account. Right.
And for a lot of reasons that we could probably go into with another show, municipal and state employees have held on to pensions, traditional pensions, which private industry started going away from 20 years ago.
Well, in the United States.
Yes, in the United States. In other countries, they're still
it's still there. And in fact, that it is something that I think, having briefly worked for a couple international companies, it was something worth thinking about.
Right.
Because it's a good benefit.
Right. But what I discovered was that our pension funds were really not being properly funded, and it can affect the
For how long were they not being funded?
Well, I can't really tell you how many years, but for quite a few, the town was either making the minimum contribution and sometimes below the minimum contribution as recommended by GAO guidelines, and that's the General Accounting Office, which is a division of the U.S. Treasury.
Right.
They set guidelines, and it's not a law, it's not a rule, you don't go to jail if you don't do it, but
right.
It's like protecting your own personal credit rating so you can get a mortgage. If you fail to fund your pension liabilities and you run your town out of money, and many cities have done this,
right.
Your bond rating goes in the toilet, you can't borrow money for like fixing your roads or fixing
right.
your buildings.
Right.
So this was the year, because the pension values fell last year when
okay.
Wall Street went down, we had to move the contribution up to make up the difference.
So you were covering, so part of what was happening is that the increase this year is to cover the decrease that happened because of Wall Street.
Exactly.
And then there's also the amount that you needed to be contributing anyway to deal with the future.
Actually, to be quite honest, we're really not even there yet, because that would be even more money. So what I've programmed into the pension contribution this year is still the minimum that's recommended by the actuarial experts and the investment experts that we deal with. But over time, we're going to have to inch that up. But we're not going to try to do this all at once.
Sure.
But the pension funds lost 8% of their value in the last year, and they were expected to earn 8%. Just by coincidence, those numbers are the same. But to get us back into a healthy position, you have to take the 8% that we lost and add it to the 8% we were supposed to earn. So that's a 16% jump in that line, and that's where we are. It's over $600,000 on that one line, and that's the pension contribution.
And that's really driving. That's the main driver.
That's the biggest single driver on the town side. The second biggest single driver is the utilities line.
Okay.
And this is something that really is. It goes back several years, going back 20 years. What I've discovered is that the water department that's operated by the town of Bethel, which, by the way, is a part of our town government that functions as if it was a separate company, like a not-for-profit.
Right.
The water department has not been earning enough revenue to break even for years. And we are talking many years. How
much of a shortfall do we have going on at this point?
We have a debt load on the water department in excess of $1.2 million.
Wasn't there also an issue with the sewage lines as well?
Yes.
And that's actually gotten better because there's already been adjustments made,
yes.
Is that correct?
2 years ago, the Public Utilities Commission voted to increase sewer rates and increase water rates to try to pay back that debt, because at that time both the sewer department and the water department were deeply in debt to the town. Now the sewer department is still down by about $40,000 or $50,000, but that gap is shrinking. But the new rates that were recommended for the water department 2 years ago were simply never enacted, because you have to put it into the budget.
Okay, and the deal is, isn't there something about that the town has to pay equal to what private citizens are being asked to pay?
Yeah, the town has to pay the same bill that you and I would pay.
Okay, and just what was the bill that the town and private citizens were paying or have paid through this year?
I can't tell you from memory the water rates, but the biggest factor in that is the fire protection.
Okay.
And what the town had been paying and charging private industry. Because
you can't charge the private industry unless the town's paying it too.
That's right.
Okay.
The town had been charging $200 per fire hydrant since 1988, and they never changed. And that's one of the problems. And over that time, the cost of fire protection, the cost of meeting state standards, meeting the quality requirements, pressure testing the system, replacing the rusty valves, because if your house is on fire, you have to have water right now.
Right.
It has to work. So that's a very, very expensive system. So the cost has gone up to over $900 per hydrant, and the town never dealt with it. So now that part of our town is now serviced by a private water company, the north side of town is serviced by United Water.
Okay.
we have to pay the going rate, which is $952 per hydrant. There is no way around it. And now, in addition to that, you know, as I've mentioned, the water department is $1.2 million in debt to the town fund.
Right.
It is kind of invisible. You know, it's not like, you know, we go out and say, hey, voters, you know, you need to give us another $1.2 million. It just kind of gets pulled out of the general fund. So the town's general fund kind of serves as the banker for the water department. Now, why is that important? Well, you have this debt load against the general fund, and that means it's hampering our ability to borrow if we need to. You know, it lowers the available cash in the general fund, and really, more importantly, it means that, you know, where you live, where you have a private well,
right,
and where I live in the Stony Hill district, so I'm paying United Water, I'm paying their rates. Well, in a way, you and I are both paying for the water that the folks down. We're subsidizing the system. Now, in addition to that, we've got some enormous costs coming up. If you drive south on Plumtrees Road past the police station, you'll see over on the right-hand side there's a fenced-in area and some big pipes, like as big around as this table, sticking out of the ground. That is a pumping station that has been there for more than 30 years. The normal life on those things is 20 to 25.
Oh dear.
It is the pumps. It's both a water pump system and a sewage pump system. The pumps have been rebuilt so many times that they are literally running on borrowed time. They could be failing right now, and they can't be fixed.
And they belong to the town.
They belong to the water department, which is
right. To the water department, which is it is the utility within the town.
That's correct. But
a municipal utility.
Right. So that pump system, we now have an RFP, a request for proposal, out. It's going to have to be replaced this year. There is no getting around it. That's going to be a $600,000 to $700,000 bill.
Okay.
And it's going to have to be covered by the water department, which is $1.2 million, which means that debt's going to get worse.
Okay.
So we're not going to fix this overnight in 1 year, but we have to start chipping away at it.
Knowing, I mean, because I know that since it's a request for proposal, you don't know exactly what the amount is going to be.
Right.
Is that in the 2010-2011 budget?
No, it's not. No, it's probably going to have to be bonded. In other words, we're going to have to borrow money again.
Right.
To do this. But the point that I'm making with the utility bills is that over time we have to. But they need
to be self-supporting,
yes,
so that when you have to make these expenditures, we're not going to bond with that. It's just it's under control because the utility has it because it's part of the routine maintenance for that.
No, it doesn't hurt us in the short term as long as we start adjusting these rates and paying back the debt. As long as we can do that, we're good. And so that's what this budget does. It starts to fix that problem and get us back to a break-even point.
So what we're hoping then is that we do what we need to do this year in terms of the town side being perhaps a little steeper than it would be.
Yes.
And with any luck,
yes,
you know, if nothing horrible happens, that we should be actually slightly lower on the town side next year, maybe. You don't know.
No, actually, I really think that the following year, the projections. This is another thing. I found that the town we kind of live budget-wise hand-to-mouth.
Oh, okay.
Now, on the school side, they've tried to look into the future a little bit, but to the best of my knowledge, that really wasn't done on the town side. But I'm doing some projections. I'm looking at really, it's beginning to look like the grand list is going to recover and grow a little bit next year. We're seeing a lot of building permits come through. We're seeing a lot of development in the reservoir area. So I think the budget pressure the following year is going to be much, much less. Okay.
In terms of the grand list, have we seen any? Because I know several years ago that part of what happened was an amazing shift to property owners, families.
Yes.
Off of business.
Yes, a few years ago.
Yeah, it was. But we've had the Big Y shopping center's gone in. There's been more development on Route 6. Of course, Target has gone in. Some things happened in Francis Clark. How is the balance of that now? Has it gotten better for homeowners?
Well, we won't know the answer to that question until we do another reval, which is scheduled for 2012. But I can tell you that the grand list, to our surprise, grew this year, in the past year, by 0.6%. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're dealing with a grand list that's over $1 billion worth of net worth, that helps, and that really is helping us a little bit this year too.
Okay.
Just a little, not a lot.
Well, but the other thing I think, because in attending budget stuff last year in particular, there was an awful lot of grandstanding about, the foreclosures in town and how we have a shortfall on the taxes aren't being paid. And the impression that I got from attending some of the Board of Finance meetings this year is that situation has also improved. Is that true?
Yes. Our tax collection rate is at 99%.
Oh, that's good.
And I have to single out one town employee, Ann Skako, our tax collector. A year ago, the time period that you mentioned where there was a shortfall, at one point it looked like we were going to be $1 million short on revenue collection. Ann and her staff worked the phones. They worked with individual taxpayers to help them, to give them the encouragement they needed, to help them find the resources that they needed. And I really think that she and her staff pretty much single-handedly got us out of that problem. But as it stands right now, as we are partway through the fiscal year, like into the back third of the fiscal year, tax collections are strong.
That's good.
And the revenue stream is strong. Good. So the economy is showing a lot of signs of life.
Good. Now the other thing that I know that kind of came up this year through the Board of Finance is that they tried to reduce your salary. And what became of that at the public hearing and the subsequent Board of Finance meeting?
Well, let me just say, that it's not about me. It's about the position. I think there's probably more controversy in it than it deserves. But to answer your question, the Board of Finance several weeks ago, really in a well-meaning effort to lower the budget, decided, because the first selectman is on page 1, they said, well, let's start with page 1, let's lower this by 4%. There was some objection from some other board members. It stuck that night, but following the public hearing this past Monday night, a lot of citizens spoke out against it. The Republican Town Committee unanimously voted and made a very polite recommendation that not be done and that it be restored. By the way, just want to make sure people know, that wasn't a raise. That was no raise.
Reduction from status quo.
It was a reduction to put the salary back to where it was in 2005.
Right.
But the Board of Finance, to their credit, listened to the voters Monday night, and last night at the final meeting, they did restore the salary back to what it was, and I'm very grateful for that. And I think it's it's my salary,
it is, but it's whoever's in the seat.
Right. I do think it's the right thing to do for the position. In fact, I think one citizen spoke very eloquently about how we probably need to have a mechanism for determining what that salary should be, so it's not subject to this way and that way.
Absolutely.
I would say, in another, for the next person, I'd be willing to sit on a commission and figure out something.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Anyway, so that's where that went.
So that's very good news. So overall, we're looking at what percentage increase again?
3.8.
Okay.
3.8. That is 0.8 of a mil.
And it's going to be voted on again in 2 parts.
Yes.
And we still have the advisory question on there?
Yes.
Do we have it twice or do we only have it once? I don't remember.
I think it's twice.
And the advisory question, by the way, is the budget too high or too low?
Right.
So regardless of how you vote on the budget, you can say what your thoughts are about it. And I think, from my opinion, and this is my opinion, humbly, not, that people do a knee-jerk, it's too high, without really, I think, really looking at what are the services that we're getting for that. When exactly is the town meeting, which is the next step?
I believe that is May 3rd.
Okay.
And then
and that's a Monday?
I don't have my calendar with me.
I don't have it either. I think normally that is, but I could be wrong.
It's normally a Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that'll be, again, at the Bethel High School auditorium?
Yes.
And that's voters, right? Registered voters have to attend?
Registered voters of town.
May attend.
And I want to be very clear that all you need to do is be a registered elector in the town of Bethel. You do not need to be a property owner to come to that meeting and vote.
Right.
And there's a lot of misconceptions
But isn't there
about
also, if you are a property owner and you are not yet on the registered voter rolls, you could, I mean, I know that you can come to town hall and vote in the referendum if you were on the grand list in October the year before. I don't know how that plays into the town meeting proper.
I don't either, but you know what?
If you're a U.S. citizen and you own property, you can come. You have to go to town hall to do it, but it can be done.
I would advise the viewers to call the town clerk's office or the registrars of voters.
Yes,
they can answer that question. Yeah,
or register to vote.
Yeah, best thing is register to vote ahead of time, and then you can have the entire party.
Well,
right.
Not early and often, really, no. So we have that coming up, and then, so what happens is we have the town meeting, and at the town meeting it's true, right, that people can make motions to reduce the budget?
That's correct.
But we have no mechanism at that point to increase, correct?
No.
Okay.
And that's why it's very, very important that everybody come and participate in this, because if you're worried about something being underfunded, you know, you don't want to skip that. That's a very important meeting.
I think of all of them, it's probably the most important. And then, just if I get this wrong, let me know. So we have the town meeting, and at the end of the town meeting is continued, adjourned.
It's adjourned.
To continue into the referendum, which is...
Correct.
X number of days based on what it's going to take to get the voting machines ready. Is that correct?
Yes. That is by law that must occur between 7 and 14 days following the town meeting. It's going to be 10 days. We used to do it a week later, but...
Well, it was a week and a day because we tried to keep it on a Tuesday.
It was a week and a day, and it'll be on Thursday, May 13th, assuming everything... And that's a change, and the reason for that is that in the old days when we used the big voting machines with the curtains, you could set up a vote in 10 minutes. You set the tumblers. You put.
I think there are people who would say it took a little longer than 10 minutes.
Well, but for a referendum where you've got yes, no, up, down, that's pretty easy. But now that we use optical scanners, the ballots have to be printed and the absentees have to be printed, and you don't know what that number is going to be till the night of the town meeting. So it takes longer to get it ready.
Okay, so. Thank you, Mr. Knickerbocker.
You're welcome.
And just to recap, we are in the middle of our budget season. We've been through the public hearing. We're coming into the town meeting, which is a critical meeting for every voter to attend within Bethel. You come, they will check you off. You can have your say. Again, at that meeting, they can lower the budget, we could, if we choose to, lower parts of the budget, but we cannot increase it. Then we go into the actual referendum itself, and the referendum is going to be on May 13th. When that happens, the polls will be open from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. If you will not be in town, because that budget vote is really critical, you can vote absentee by going into the town clerk's office and letting them know that you're going to be out, and they can give you the information to do that. This is... Okay. This is Janice Stevenson. This is Bethel Today, and we're sponsored by the Bethel Democratic Town Committee. Again, thank you, Mr. Knickerbocker, for attending.
Welcome.
And we'll see you next time. Good night.